If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to Mindshock True Crime. This is your host, Bruce McGuire, and you are listening to the JONBENET RAMSEY series. This is episode 7, Re-Examined. And in the previous episode, The Neighborhood, I went over the neighbors and various theories and curiosities surrounding the Ramsey home and unanswered questions that linger still. And there have been some comments and theories put forth online that I have not as of yet gone over. And of course, this is Mindshock, where the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure, and we logically and objectively examine every single avenue and theory in a comprehensive fashion. And we will be examining further theories, both involving Glen Meyer and not involving Glen Meyer, and individuals that may have written the Ransom Note and may have written it specifically trying to emulate Patsy Ramsey's handwriting. And that is something we haven't discussed yet on Mindshock that we need to discuss, because if somebody was trying to frame the parents, they did a pretty good job of it. Did someone write the Ransom Note? Someone who was in the house, perhaps during their Christmas party, who had access to the notepad and other writing materials and had access to previous samples of Patsy Ramsey's handwriting. And what is the true extent of Glen Meyer's involvement? And how coincidental is it that he was this mysterious boarder with the Barnhills right across the street, who possibly had interacted with JONBENET and Burke, possibly multiple times? Of course, the dog was at the Barnhills, and the kids liked seeing the dog and playing with the dog. So there's so many unanswered questions that, for whatever reason, a lot of people don't like to examine these theories. And if you're really after the truth, you have to examine everything in an objective and logical fashion, and that's why Mindshock exists. As always, if you enjoy the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal and help support the channel, help us get more mind-shocking podcasts out there, not just in the JONBENET Ramsey series, but in all of our true crime series and other topics as well. Just check the link in the description. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, like and share this podcast on social media platforms, of which you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic logical analysis co-podcaster requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings, thoughts of any kind, leave them in the comments section. So a couple of interesting comments here. So again, with Glen Meyer, he mysteriously went to their Christmas party looking for the Barnhill. I mean, nothing about Glen Meyer adds up. I mean, nothing at all. So there are weird people out there. So if he really was just this weird guy and John Ramsey wanted to paint suspicion on him, I suppose that's a pretty good target. So if John Ramsey was the guilty party, and or Patsy and or Burke, or one of them, and John was covering for either himself or other family members of his, this would be a good target. But it's almost like Glen Meyer did this to himself, because his actions don't really make a lot of sense. So on the YouTube comments of the previous podcast regarding Glen Meyer, here's one from Jessica. There was also the man who came to the door during the Christmas party. The Ramseys discuss in their book that a man they didn't know rang the doorbell and left. So they didn't really know Glen Meyer. Another, Michelle wrote this: the basement neighbor could have possibly seen John Ramsey's pay stub while roaming around at the party. I thought I read somewhere that one of his pay stubs was shoved up on a messy shelf, possibly in the kitchen. Now, what's really weird is, if that's true, what kind of a family are the Ramseys even? I mean, we have the broken basement windows that these millionaires can't afford to replace. I mean, there's a lot of things that just don't make sense about anything regarding the Ramsey home or the Ramseys, their other home. It seems like wherever you look, there's unanswered questions, coincidences, and anomalies that just there's, without really nailing them down, it's impossible to rule them out. Why are there so many weird things happening? And is that a real clue in and of itself? That there's this much weirdness surrounding the Ramseys, their neighborhood, and all of these individuals associated with them, either directly or indirectly. Whereas, again, we can compare to other cases, even other cases with millionaires involved, there's usually one or two weird issues or connections. Not 50, one or two. So, and of course, in some cases, there's zero. It's just either nothing is known or there's just one avenue, and there's not a lot of strikes against that avenue. So, here's another interesting comment here while I'm going down the comments. I'm going to have to explore this in other episodes. Donna commented here, John Mark Carr's wife went to the same hospital and gave birth the same night that JONBENET was born. And there's a lot of other curiosities with John Mark Carr and his possible history with John Ramsey. I mean, there's just so, no matter which avenue you look at, there's just so much weirdness in this case. Some other comments here discussing the Ransom Note by Vertex. The Ransom Note seemed to be written by an adolescent between 18 and 26 years old with a lark in mind, not the Ramseys. Nicole responded here, my mind goes to John Andrew or a kid of a family friend who was a young adult, and why JONBENET did not scream is because she knew who he was. A response, the next door neighbor did hear a scream between 12 and 2 a.m. And again, we don't know, because there was definitely funny business that went on. We don't know what exactly that was, because if somebody else killed JONBENET Ramsey, if Patsy Ramsey did indeed discover the body, was that her who screamed? I mean, the neighbor heard us scream. I mean, we don't have much more to go on. Is it a scream of a little girl or an older woman? We don't really know, because if the scream wakes somebody, it's hard to understand the scream exactly, to pinpoint it. So, again, here is a theory. Not sure who the author was. I don't know if this was reposted to Reddit or whatnot, but I will read it. It is quite interesting, and it brings about a couple of interesting theories and avenues as of yet unexplored. Glen Meyer was the author of the note, and he organized this crime for money. He knew 3 very bad men who lived in the house on the corner. 2 of them went in the house when the Ramseys went to dinner. He was the lookout, and why he pretended to go to bed. He was secretly living in the basement, and the Ramseys didn't even know. Patsy gave the Barnhills Christmas cards, Christmas letters, and birthday cards in her own writing, and some notes. And this is why Myers could copy some of her letters and numbers. This was all he needed. From his vantage point, he could see enough through the windows of both staircases and knew they came down the back staircase every morning for coffee. He took a notepad from the house on the 23rd at the Christmas party. He got to know a lot about the family since moving into the basement. This is why the pineapple and milk was staged on the table. It was freshly cut and came from the house on the corner that had a big party that night. A great deal of items were placed, moved, brought in, taken from cupboards and drawers all over the house, basement, and a few things outside. The setup was in place. If no money, death of child, and revenge, they didn't care who went to jail. The 4 involved have been identified. He was desperate for money and had a judgment against him for $70,000 before Christmas. The 2 monsters in the house were in the house before this night, and is why they knew where everything was and what to do and where to go to craft this insidious crime. He used Joe Barnhill to pass misinformation to reporters, telling Joe that the Ramseys told police they were involved. That poster of the plane that was on the wall in his room, as Joe was a radial gunner on that plane in World War II. It was a famous bomber plane and lauded as bringing the war to victory. It was called SB-2C. So SBTC. T for the number 2. Interesting. It had a logo on the side, Victory. He also knew about the big underpants that Patsy had bought her niece for Christmas and had later given to JonBenet as they were from Bloomingdale's. And JonBenet also got a special Barbie doll from there. The doll had her own pair of underwear called Bloomies. JonBenet wanted the big underwear, so she had some like her doll. They were a pack of 7 and had the weekdays on the waistband. Patsy gave in to JonBenet, and the pack was put in the back of JonBenet's drawer in her bathroom till she would fit them about 6 to 8 years away. When they got home, JonBenet went over to the Barnhills to tell them about her special presents, and is why Meyer knew about the underwear. There is photo of that drawer pulled out. JonBenet was found wearing the Wednesday ones. That year, Christmas was on Wednesday. They had nowhere to operate, and JonBenet was never to be taken out of the basement. There is a phone in the basement. The open window and the staircase was a subterfuge. There was no entry or exit through that window. There was no snow on the ground. That was a lie from Boulder PD. It didn't even snow that night. Was ice on the paths and melted when the sun came up. Officer French, there at 6 a.m. and searching the basement, stood at that door and couldn't pull it open, though it only had a latch up the top. He said he was looking for entry points and walked away. The 2 in the cellar still had a device holding that door shut. They left after search through the butler's kitchen exit door, then down to the back fence and over. There's a laneway at the back. Cops coming meant no money, and they viciously strangled JonBenet in a fit of rage. Then the horrific head blows when JonBenet was taken into the cellar. That was not a garrote, it was a complex bondage device. The facts are known because of the private investigators who never gave up, advanced forensics, and as happens in a lot of unsolved crimes, people talk eventually. The air taser used on JonBenet has been identified. The burns on her back were from this type of taser. The burn on her face was bigger, as placed there many times. The second burn was under her ear. Go to the murder of Gerald Boggs, 1993, Steamboat Springs, Colorado. Burn on his face is exactly the same, only the second is on his earlobe. Justice is coming. The totally inept and despicable Boulder Police Department are holding things up. Okay, so first thing we have to give this individual, that is a well thought out theory. Now, some people believe Michael Helgoth was one of these individuals, or Michael Helgoth knew one of the individuals involved here. Now, of course, we're not going to fall for any black and white logical fallacies. None of this theory might be true, or part of it might be true, or this could be, perhaps this was a plan that was never actually executed. Or there was a mild attempt to execute it, but it never happened. Or it happened as described here. They're alleging that two of the perpetrators were still in the house when the police first arrived. I mean, again, that's tough to really consider, but I mean, can we rule that out completely? I don't know. But the ransom note is interesting because if Glen Meyer really did write the ransom note, and he was in that basement with the SB-2C bomber plane with Victory there, and he just wanted to put random stuff. I mean, is he mentally, again, are we operating with an individual that's all there mentally? A lot of times in true crime cases, so-called true crime aficionados, they write off the possibility saying, oh, well, he wouldn't want to incriminate himself. Well, here's the thing. Is he operating with a full deck? Was he under the influence at the time he wrote the letter? Or if not, is he mentally all there? Do we know that for sure? If he's some kind of sociopath and he could easily pass polygraphs, is it possible he wanted to mess with people? He wrote it in Patsy's handwriting, but put that detail in just to screw with people. How often do mentally disturbed individuals and criminals just want to screw around? They're not thinking 100% logically, oh, this is going to incriminate me. Their brains work in a different way. So pretending and hallucinating their brains can only work the way a normal rational person would. Therefore, he didn't write the letter. That's not logical. That's a bit silly because, again, deranged criminals do not operate the way normal people operate. Again, this isn't rocket science. So it is possible theoretically that he wrote this, and if he's staring up at that picture of the World War II bomber, Victory SB2C, does that explain it? It might. But what's curious is we really haven't spent a lot of time thinking about the possibility that someone was trying to impersonate Patsy Ramsey's handwriting, and they did a decent job at it. Not perfect, not completely botched, and that's why all these handwriting experts have different opinions. There's handwriting experts that definitively state it was definitely Patsy, and there's some that state that not Patsy, and then there's some that state that it's hard to tell. Is this a result of someone trying to impersonate Patsy Ramsey's handwriting, regardless of who it is? Now, who had motive, means, and opportunity? You could argue that Glen Meyer possibly did. There's also a lot of other individuals. But if they really are leaving these pay stubs in the kitchen, or maybe not even in the kitchen, maybe elsewhere that could still be found by someone roaming the house during a Christmas party, then they would know the exact bonus if that was written out on the pay stub. And again, do we know for certain whether it was or it wasn't? I mean, there's a lot of unanswered questions here. But even if it wasn't, if John Ramsey is a type of braggart and he was bragging about his bonus, somebody could have overheard. Again, not outside the realm of possibility during a busy Christmas party that things are said. And again, maybe he was having a conversation he thought was in private in an office or off to the side, and Glen Meyer happened to be roaming around, possibly lurking outside. What do we really know about Glen Meyer? The other thing that we don't really talk about, I mean, yeah, John Ramsey had a lot of publicity, but so did Patsy. April 1996, Patsy Ramsey actually had a women's magazine profile her, and they put a lot of information about her and her family in the articles, which is interesting because now we have a lot of individuals that could have known. I mean, they were in the public eye so much, not just in the circle of their neighbors and friends in the Boulder area, but anybody could have access to these magazines, and anybody following the beauty pageant scene, which could include a lot of deranged individuals, photographers, etc. Plenty of people we have yet to go over in depth in the JONBENET case, but we'll get to it. But this is interesting because she was Patsy Ramsey was profiled in Women's Magazine, and John Ramsey, of course, Lockheed Martin connections there. So these are people firmly in the public eye. They're not under the radar in any way. And then, of course, December 6th, 1996, JONBENET was in the local Christmas parade. She sang The Good Ship Lollipop, and her name was actually on the side of the float that she was riding on. Again, very, very public. Burke was also in the parade. The December 13th party, this was a church party at the Ramsey home. More than 150 people from the church attended the church party at the Ramsey home. This is December 13th, 1996. December 17th was the Little Miss Christmas competition, Southwest Plaza in Denver. JONBENET Ramsey crowned Little Miss Christmas. December 20th, the Access Graphics Luncheon, celebrating reaching $1 billion in sales. That same day, JONBENET Ramsey is in Rock Around the Clock performance at High Peaks Elementary School. December 21st, Boulder Daily Camera publishes the Access Graphics $1 billion sales mark article. December 22nd, JONBENET's last pageant, she performs Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree and modeled a few different outfits. The Ramseys also sent out a Christmas letter. The letter, Dear friends and family, it's been another busy year at the Ramsey household. Can't believe it's almost over and time to start again. Melinda, 24, graduated from Medical College of Georgia and is working in pediatric ICU at Kennestone Hospital in Atlanta. John Andrew, 20, is a sophomore at the University of Colorado. Burke is a busy fourth grader where he really shines in math and spelling. He played flag football this fall and is currently on a basketball binge. His little league team was number 1. He lost just about all of his baby teeth, so I'm sure we'll be seeing the orthodontist in 1997. JonBenet is enjoying her first year in real school. Kindergarten in the core knowledge program is fast-paced and 5 days a week. She has already been moved ahead to first grade math. She continues to enjoy participating in talent and modeling pageants. She was named America's Royal Tiny Miss last summer and is Colorado Little Miss Christmas. Her teaching says that she is outgoing, that she will never have trouble delivering an oral book report. John is always on the go, traveling hither and yon. Access recently celebrated its $1 billion mark in sales, so he's pretty happy. He and his crew were underway in Port Huron to Mackinac Island yacht race in July, but had to pull over midway due to lack of wind. Can you believe that? But his real love is his new old-looking boat, Grand Season, which he spent months designing. I spent most of my free time working in the school and doing volunteer work. The Charlevoix house was on the home tour in July and will likely appear in one of the Better Home and Gardens publications in 1997. Again, this is a completely in the public eye on so many different levels. I mean, it's just, you cannot get more public than the Ramseys were at this time. On a recent trip to New York City, my friend and I appeared among the throng of fans on the Today Show. This is Patsy Ramsey here. Al Roker and Brian actually talked to us, and we were on camera for a few fleeting moments. We are all enjoying continued good health and look forward to seeing you in 1997. One final note, thank you all my friends and my dear husband for surprising me with the biggest, most surprising, most outrageous 40th birthday bash I've ever had. We'll be spending my actual birthday on the Disney Big Red Boat over the new year. Merry Christmas and much love, the Ramseys. Then there was the December 23rd Christmas party. So supposedly the December 22nd is when the Ramseys sent out this Christmas letter written by Patsy. And it's curious if the letter, again, if this was not a printed out letter, if this was written in her handwriting or copied or whatever, Xeroxed, copied from her handwriting, then anybody who had this letter would also have her handwriting, not just close family, friends, neighbors. So December 23rd was the Christmas party attended by 30 guests. So again, the December 13th church party, 150 people from the church. And if the true perpetrators were from the church, I'll be getting into that in future episodes, they would also have had access to the house and possible handwriting samples. But the December 23rd party is the one I discussed in the previous episode and the one most people focus on. So at this 23rd Christmas party, that's former journalism professor Bill McReynolds played Santa Claus. This was also the night of the allegedly mistaken 911 call made from the Ramsey home at 6:47 p.m. And Therese Hilliary answered this. The caller hung up without saying a word, so the police called back only to get the Ramseys' answering machine. An officer goes to the home and leaves shortly around 7 p.m. after he is assured that everything was fine. And of course, this was the Holstein situation that I went over in the previous episode. Christmas Eve, an article is published in the Boulder Daily Camera about the Ramsey party. JonBenet played at her friend Megan Kostanik's house and told Megan's mother about a secret visit from Santa. The family ate at Pasta J's and either before or after attended the twilight service at the St. John's Episcopal Church. 9 p.m., John retrieves JonBenet's silver Christmas bike from neighbor Joe Barnhill's garage and places it under the Christmas tree. Then John and Patsy get the Christmas presents they had stashed in the basement. And is the house really that small? Or were they didn't want JonBenet and Burke to find the Christmas presents? Is that why they hid them at their neighbor's house? I mean, I don't know. How many people hide their children's gifts in their neighbor's house? Let's get a poll going on that. Because I haven't really heard that that's a thing. But then again, nothing seems to be really normal with the Ramseys. Christmas Day, 1996, 6 a.m., the Ramsey family went downstairs, opened presents, which took about an hour. JonBenet gave her dad a gumball machine that dispensed jelly beans. Her grandmother gave JonBenet a real gold ring. Her Aunt Pam gave her a cross with gold chains, and her Aunt Polly gave her a jewelry making kit. Santa Claus brought JonBenet a brand new bicycle. She and her father tried it out that afternoon before the family went to dinner at a close friend's home. Burke got a Nintendo 64 and a remote-controlled car. Patsy received a new bike and a green paper ornament. The Ramsey family then had pancakes for breakfast. The kids were playing with their toys while Patsy and John were preparing for the family to go to a second home in Michigan for vacation the day after Christmas. A bunch of kids started to show up and wanted to know what everyone got for Christmas. Burke was up in his room playing video games. About noon, John went to the hangar to check on the plane and returns around 2 hours later. So these are also critical details that kind of get lost in the mix. So a bunch of kids show up to see what everyone got for Christmas. So how many individuals were really around the Ramsey home in the short time period before JonBenet Ramsey's death? I'll continue the timeline here just to round it out here. So on December 25th, 10 p.m., JonBenet had been up late with her friends for a family friends party. She fell asleep in the car on the ride home. John and Patsy Ramsey maintain they last saw their daughter alive when they put her to bed Christmas night. So at midnight, neighbor Scott Gibbons remembers seeing a light on in the Ramseys' kitchen. 2 a.m., neighbor Melody Stanton allegedly hears a scream from the Ramsey home. Her husband reportedly hears the sound of a metal on concrete sometime after the scream. Years later, Melody backtracked on her statement, stating she actually heard the noise 2 nights prior, and is this pressure from BPD or other sources that caused her to backtrack? And I went over that in previous episodes. You could check those out for the whole Scream timeline. So 5:30 a.m., John gets up first, takes a shower, gets dressed. Then Patsy gets and puts on the same outfit she had the night before and reapplies her makeup. She then stops off at the second floor to wash JonBenet's jumpsuit. Patsy then goes to the kitchen to make coffee. This is when she says she found a 2-page note on the back spiral staircase stating that JonBenet had been kidnapped. The note was addressed to Mr. Ramsey and claimed to be from a small foreign faction demanding a ransom of $118,000 in cash. While this was happening, John was shaving. Patsy screams and heads to JonBenet's room. Hearing the screams, John meets Patsy on the stairs. Patsy went up to JonBenet's room to find it empty. Together, John and Patsy check on Burke, who appeared to be in his room asleep. 5:45 a.m., shortly after finding the note, Patsy calls family friends Fleet and Priscilla White and John and Barbara Fernie from her bedroom while John goes down the stairs to look at the ransom note. 5:52 a.m., Patsy finally calls the police, detailing the supposed kidnapping and the demands on the ransom note. Some people, including the 911 operator that took the call, Kim Archuleta, think that Patsy forgot to hang up when she thought she had, and the fuzzy audio and the end of recording was Patsy having a conversation with 2 additional people in her home. Now, quick aside here, that might not be so quick. Now, again, is Archuleta the most common name ever? It's not exactly Smith or Johnson or Davis or any of these super common names. Archuleta. Kim Archuleta. Now, do we have another Archuleta? Michael Archuleta is actually John Ramsey's pilot. Of course, there's rumors online that Kim Archuleta is directly connected and related to Michael Archuleta. I don't know if that's ever been officially nailed down, but here's an article from Bustle.com, September 18th, 2016, by Noor Al-Sabai. Kim Archuleta wanted to help solve the Ramsey case. At the time, nearly 20 years ago, only one person heard the initial 911 call from Patsy Ramsey, who reported that she'd found a ransom note and that her daughter was missing. But until now, the public had heard next to nothing from Kim Archuleta, the 911 dispatcher from the JONBENET RAMSEY case, who took Patsy's 911 call on the morning of December 26, 1996. But now Archuleta is speaking out and revealing the details of that first call that started a 2-decade-long cultural obsession with this strange murder. Those following this roller coaster of a case might wonder why the dispatcher didn't testify in the case. Years later, her voice is finally being heard. In an interview for the first part of the 3-part CBS docuseries special, The Case of JONBENET Ramsey, Archuleta told former New Scotland Yard analyst Laura Richards and former FBI agent Jim Clemente, who also worked on the case, that she was unable to testify because she was allegedly placed under a gag order and was, quote, never talked to again, end quote. So again, for all the coincidence theorists out there that maintain that gag orders are basically a myth in most cases, again, anybody looking at true crime or historical fact, there's documented gag orders. That's why the term gag order exists, because it's not a myth. And it's not as rare as some people think as well. I mean, look at all the cases where gag orders were made public. How many cases were gag orders instituted that were not made public yet? So they existed and were used, but nobody knows about them, or at least not yet. So of course, it's possible that there are gag orders in many cases. So to theorize that there's a gag order in place, regardless of which case you're looking at, it's not as outside of the realm of possibility as coincidence theorists posit. Okay, back to the article. Although she didn't go into details about what she heard during this segment of the special, Archuleta explained what she heard after she thought Patsy had hung up, how her voice allegedly changed, and how the words Archuleta struggled to hear supposedly could have turned the case around, had she ever been interviewed for the case. While faced with allegations in the past, the Ramseys have always said they were innocent, and they were cleared from involvement in the case by DNA evidence in 2008. And of course, that DNA evidence has been called into question, so we really don't know exactly what it does or doesn't prove. During the interview, Archuleta alleged that Patsy initially sounded hysterical, but her tone of voice reportedly shifted to one that sounded more rigid and calm once she'd thought she'd hung up the phone. Though the phone call was only 6 seconds long, Archuleta said Patsy allegedly sounded like she was discussing what to do now, that they'd called the police, and that it bothered her immensely. It sounded like she said, okay, we've called the police, now what? And that disturbed me. So I remained on the phone trying to hear what was being said. It sounded like there were 2 voices in the room, maybe 3 different ones. I had a bad feeling about this. To me, it seemed rehearsed.
911 emergency. Police. What's going on? 515th Street. What's going on there, ma'am? We have a kidnapping. Please explain to me what's going on, okay? There's a note left in our daughter's phone. A note was left in your daughter's phone? How old is your daughter? 6 years old. She's gone. 6 years old. How long ago was it? I don't know. I just found the note. And my daughter's dead. Does it say who took her? What? Does it say who took her? I don't know. There's a ransom note here. It's a ransom note? It says FBTC. Victory. Please. Okay, what's your name? Are you Patsy Ramsey? I'm the mother. Oh my God! Please. Okay, I'm sending an officer over, okay? Please. Do you know how long she's been gone? No, I don't. Please, we just got out. Is she right here? Oh my God, please. Okay, girl. Is somebody? I am, honey. Please. Take a deep breath, please, okay? Hurry. Kathy. Kathy. Kathy.
When asked what she made of what she heard, Archuleta merely shook her head. While it's important to note that Patsy, her husband John, and their son, and JonBenet's brother, Burke, were cleared of all suspicion using DNA testing, the story that Archuleta seems to put forth is chilling. Nobody can truly know what happened that day, but finally hearing from the woman who took that first life-changing call brings up more questions than answers. Okay, and I'm going to add another Bruce McGuire theory here. Is it possible Patsy Ramsey didn't want to go along with John Ramsey? Or if it's not them, if there were other people there, we haven't really discussed this possibility. Is it possible the true perpetrator was there in the room with them and it wasn't Burke? You could hear Burke in the call too saying, "What did you find?" or something along those lines. So it's possible he was involved, but again, without assuming or jumping to any conclusions, either is it possible that Patsy Ramsey pretended to hang up the phone and she intentionally didn't hang it up all the way because she wanted to leave clues for police, either because she didn't want to go along with John Ramsey, or there was another individual there, friend, family member, stranger, who knows, that was forcing her. If this was all some kind of botched kidnapping charade, did someone force Patsy Ramsey to write that note at gunpoint even? Maybe not even at gunpoint. What if somebody, I don't know. It's curious, because if we're examining all possibilities, is it possible Patsy Ramsey wrote the note against her will, and that's why the handwriting isn't 100% perfect match? Or, of course, someone else wrote it to try to frame Patsy Ramsey in this whole botched kidnapping. Now, regarding the phone call, obviously it's possible Patsy Ramsey was just distraught and she didn't hang up the phone perfectly. That happens. That's not the most rare. It's totally within the realm of possibility that someone under extreme stress didn't hang up the phone properly. Is it also possible that she did that on purpose? Because according to Kim Archuleta, Patsy Ramsey still had the wherewithal to sound relatively calm. So if she's putting on a hysterical performance by the instruction of either John Ramsey or another party, or possibly even herself, although if what Kim is saying is true, she said, "We call them, now what?" then that's not her idea. So was she told to put on this hysterical performance? At that time, do they even know that JonBenet is dead? See, again, these are all unanswered questions and variables that should not be assumed by anyone trying to find the truth. A lot of so-called true crime aficionados are obsessed with proving their theory true instead of objectively and neutrally examining all available evidence and identifying assumed variables as such. If something is not definitively proven, you cannot use that as you cannot factor for X if you don't know what X is in an equation. So if there's more variables here than most people would like to admit. There's a lot of different possibilities here. And if John or Patsy were possibly complicit, or if this is overarching to some other kind of crime, or their complicity in something else, we're identifying this perpetrator. And if this was botched or accidental, and if somehow they know that, is there a scenario where they know the guilty party? It's not themselves, but they know or Burke, and there's another guilty party here. And for whatever reason, they know that outing the guilty party is not going to bring JonBenet back. And they know that exposing the guilty party would expose themselves in something else and make life worse for them in some capacity. Again, these are unknown variables. Would they not name the guilty party even if they know who the guilty party is? Or does the guilty party have some other kind of dirt on John Ramsey? And that's why John Ramsey can never go public with the perpetrator. Was John Ramsey involved in some kind of child trafficking or exploitation ring, as some rumors suggest? In the post-Jeffrey Epstein era, the coincidence theorists look a lot sillier, denying that there's any kind of government conspiracies involving human trafficking. I mean, this has been exposed so much now. How much of a clueless, Dunning-Kruger-like coincidence theorist must one be to deny the possibility that John Ramsey runs in these elite circles connected to Lockheed Martin, etc.? It's just, again, we have to consider these possibilities. And the link between Kim Archuleta and Michael Archuleta, what do we make of that? Again, the pilot, Michael Archuleta. And there are some curiosities around the pilot as well. And this is from a post. Her name was JONBENET.tumblr.com, February 12, 2017. Michael Archuleta, the Ramsey family's pilot and occasional babysitter, was watching JonBenet and Burke one evening while the parents went out to dinner. To help pass the time, Michael put on a movie for them to watch, but JonBenet quickly became bored and disappeared upstairs to play with her dolls. When she came back downstairs, JonBenet told Michael that she could not find her Jolly Rancher candies. "Can you help me find them?" "Okay," Michael replied. "Where did they go?" "I think I put them down the laundry chute where we're supposed to put the dirty clothes." The two went down into the basement of the Charlevoix house to sort through the hamper of dirty laundry. Soon they started pulling out the colorful candies and began to set them in a pile on the floor. 20 years later, Michael and his wife Pam still laugh at this memory whenever they see Jolly Ranchers. This is from Pam Archuleta's book, The Pilot's Wife. So how many people didn't know that Michael Archuleta is not only the family pilot, he actually babysat JonBenet and Burke Ramsey? How many adults have had access to the Ramsey children in either a babysitting fashion or just present while they're playing with the dog, as in the case of the Barnhills? I mean, it just seems like so many individuals could have targeted the children or have been blackmailed for information about the children and or the Ramseys. I mean, is this out of the realm of possibility? A reviewer of this book posted this on Goodreads.com. A friend recommended this book, and since I am from Boulder and had met Patsy Ramsey several years before the tragic death of JonBenet, I was curious. This paints an interesting look at the Ramseys and confirms what I always thought, that they were innocent. In this account, I was moved how deeply religious the Ramseys were during this awful time. Such a tragedy. And so it's interesting because some people become more religious if they've done something wrong. Other people find solace in religion in a time of tragedy. So it really doesn't say one way or the other, or they were extremely religious before also. So a couple other issues with Michael Archuleta, but first, apparently he's the one who flew them to Charlevoix, Michigan. And apparently John Ramsey had changing stories. Were they supposed to go to Charlevoix, and then all of a sudden John Ramsey had some kind of meeting in Atlanta supposedly he couldn't miss, even when his daughter is dead? There's just, again, a lot of unanswered questions across the board. Let's look at some more snippets from the book, because of course John Ramsey did call the pilot twice. And the second time supposedly was for details for this meeting, and then the police told him he couldn't go, of course. So here's some interesting snippets from the book again. Patsy Ramsey, what the pilot's wife knew. So apparently they had stayed with the Ramseys in their Charlevoix home as well, and Michael spent a lot of time with the Ramsey kids. So here's an interesting story. I believe this was repeated by other people as well. December 6, 1996. When we were driving along the route for the parade, I would occasionally look at the people watching us in the parade. There were so many people just out on a cold December night with their families watching and trying to keep warm. As we got close to the judge's booth, I saw a man, a well-dressed man, in fact, who looked rather nice, with a very angry look on his face, running towards the car. I mean, how could he look nice with an angry... I mean, I don't know how... Okay, whatever. Our car had gotten a little behind since the parade would often stop and wait for slower vehicles to move forward. It happened so fast, and just before he reached the curb, we sped up to catch up with the rest of the participants. When I looked back to see where the man was, he had disappeared. He looked familiar to me, and he gave me a strange feeling like I knew who he was. I had no idea what he saw in our vehicle that made him look so angry. I did not expect something like that to happen during a fun time like this, and it caught me off guard. Michael left, and I went back to sleep, only to have the phone ring at 6:10 a.m., and John Ramsey said rather frantically, "I need to talk to Michael." I told him Michael had already gone to the airport and was getting the plane ready, and he said, "They got JONBENET." I asked him what he meant, and he said, "She has been kidnapped." He sounded very upset and wanted to get in touch with Michael right away. I told him to call Michael on his cell phone. That's interesting. So how many people think that John Ramsey's an excellent actor? Which is also interesting. See, Patsy, who's a pageant queen and a performer, people, that's a little bit more believable, but how good of an actor is John Ramsey? So he's either faking all of this, calling Pam and telling her that JONBENET has been kidnapped. Okay. Continuing on here, later around 8 a.m., I got a call from John and Patsy's friend Fleet White, and he questioned me about Michael and the flight. I said, "How do I know who you really are because I do not know your voice? What if you are one of the kidnappers and want to get to his other 2 children?" Fleet became angry and told me who he was, and I said, "If you are who you say you are, then give me your phone number and I will call you back to verify it's you." He did so, but with resistance. Michael came home and was terribly upset. That day will always be embedded in my memory forever. Michael was sobbing that who could take JONBENET and why. He was beside himself. I told him to calm down because maybe she would be found and everything would be fine. Was Michael more upset than John Ramsey? I don't know. Continuing on here, Michael said, "I cannot believe what just happened. The wind came up very strong, and I felt JONBENET's spirit come over me, and then the wind died down as suddenly as it came up. Pam, I felt her spirit said goodbye." I wasn't as close to JONBENET as Michael had been, so I knew in my heart that she needed closure with him and not me. I know that they could not have murdered their very own daughter when there was so much love. I never saw anything like abuse or anger from either parent. I grew up with an abusive father, and John was nowhere near capable of hurting his daughter. Patsy loved JONBENET with her whole being. And again, these are Pam Archuletta's observations, and even if true, that doesn't mean that an accident could not have occurred. Michael was a constant target for the press and radio talk show person Peter Boyle. He was always being accused of hiding the murder weapon or knowing more than he admitted. He had gone before the grand jury himself for a day and never could talk about what he was asked. Michael was asked by one reporter what he thought about the leak to the papers that he had been given a murder weapon by John and that he had taken and hidden it. Michael said no comment and walked into the house. As it turned out, Michael's brother, John, had been hard up for money, and he had sold a story to the Globe, saying that Michael had been given the murder weapon and taken it away for John Ramsey. John, Michael's brother, said he had done this the day JONBENET's body had been discovered. So this is John Archuleta, I'm assuming. Our marriage had felt the strain of years of media attention, hiding the Ramseys, and trying to make sense of things that we could not. We lost something in loving each other, and for a while we sought out others to ease our pain. More loss was going on every day, and I thought I had lost Michael to another woman, but we remained together. The loss was huge, but the overall decision to repair the damage outweighed the alternative. So it's interesting. These quotes from the book are quite interesting. Another commentator, Rich, here said this: yes, Michael was thoroughly investigated, but there was nothing concrete that could be used against him. As far as Pam is concerned, I doubt she would have reported anything about Michael that could have been interpreted by police as suspicious. The impression I got from reading the book is that Michael wasn't usually at home anyway. I find it interesting that Pam didn't bother mentioning in the book where Michael was that night, when she could have easily said he was with her that particular night. Quick aside here, here's an anonymous comment by someone named, okay, it's not quite anonymous, someone named Robert here posted this. Patsy found out about the incest. My idea was that Patsy came to JonBenet's darkened room with the flashlight and caught John in the act and struck at John with the flashlight and accidentally hit JonBenet. John convinced Patsy that she killed JonBenet and would be held accountable. John further used the train track to show Patsy that JonBenet was dead and no use to call 911. Now John is guilty and so is Patsy guilty. That's what I read of the grand jury findings. Someone named Robert posted this April 4th, 2016. And that's interesting. So does that mean, what kind of access did he had to the grand jury findings? Because if it was some kind of an accidental death in this capacity, and they were going to find the Ramseys guilty of child neglect or accessory after the fact or something and trying to cover this accident up, it wasn't intentional premeditated murder. If it was Patsy attacking John and accidentally hitting JonBenet in the process, like, how does that scenario unfold? And if this individual's not lying in reading, it said he read of the grand jury findings. So he's not clearly stating he read the grand jury transcripts himself. He's saying he read something about the grand jury findings. I don't know where. But has this theory been investigated? Of course, we've talked about the possibility that she found out, that Patsy found out or whatever. But if this scenario unfolded like this, does that explain everything? It still doesn't explain Burke saying, what did you find? Unless Burke thought he was in trouble. Maybe Burke did hit JonBenet. He had hit her before. If he hit her, not necessarily to knock her unconscious, but or I don't know, maybe he stole one of her presents, whatever. He's worried about being in trouble. So he's a kid worried about being in trouble. Would he ask, what did you find, even if he wasn't responsible for some kind of accidental death regarding JonBenet? If that's the situation, then maybe this is how it all unfolded. Okay, so let's go back to exploring the pilot. So this is from Brill's Content, February 2000, Archeletta's tabloid story, which I touched upon earlier. For many reporters, getting the story out ultimately became more important than getting it right. And context was hardly the only element missing. Tabloids such as The Globe, which kept JonBenet on the front page for 3 years and counting, fabricated stories outright, says Jeffrey Shapiro, a freelancer who exclusively reported for The Globe from February 28, 1997 to February 11, 1999. Such a manufactured news bulletin began, Shapiro recalls, over the weekend of August 22, 98. Shapiro was facing more pressure than usual to find a blockbuster headline. Just a few days before, the National Enquirer had landed the biggest tabloid scoop of recent months. 911 call nails brother in murder cover-up and it's on tape, blared the Enquirer. Shapiro had been a tireless tabloid soldier. He admits that short of paying his sources and breaking the law, he would do anything to live up to his email address, JBS Avenger. He pestered people he believed had information. He climbed trees to peek through windows to watch police investigations of the Ramsey home. He even tried to get close to the Ramsey's minister by pretending that he wanted to convert from Judaism to Christianity. Now that is a dedicated tabloid reporter. If he actually did it for real, even more Dedicated. Shapiro defends his tactics even as he betrays his lack of perspective about how big of a deal the Ramsey case is. Do you believe in undercover journalism? He asks. If you were a journalist who knew you had to go undercover to break up a big drug ring that was the cause of death to innocent people, or even to solve one of the two mysteries, what is on the missing 18 minutes of Watergate tapes, or about the grassy knoll assassin who shot President Kennedy, would you go undercover? I would. I would in a second, he says with complete earnestness. Days after the Inquirer's 911 scoop, Shapiro's editor had a big lead for him. Late in the night, on August 22nd, 1998, Shapiro says one of his editors, Joe Mullins, called him at home to tell him that Mullins had found a source with the perfect juicy nugget. The lead, Shapiro recalls, was that John Ramsey had handed his pilot, Michael Archuleta, a box potentially filled with evidence such as the cord used to strangle JONBENET and the tape found covering her mouth. Mullins referred questions on this topic to Globe's press representatives. So did Tony Frost, the paper's editor. The press representative declined to comment. Shapiro says that when his editor filled him in on the details of the tip, he questioned the accuracy of the main source, who turned out to be Archuleta's brother. Apparently, in addition to telling Mullins about Ramsey's having allegedly dropped off the murder weapon at the pilot's home, Archuleta's brother gave Mullins another tip that Shapiro knew was demonstrably incorrect. The details of a conversation Shapiro knew could not have taken place. Mullins defends his source, Shapiro says, telling the young reporter that although the pilot's brother may have been wrong about the conversation, he was sure about the box delivery. Shapiro says he wasn't convinced. But Mullins assigned Shapiro to look into the tip anyway, and Shapiro went out to stake Archuleta's house. After waiting for hours, Shapiro called Mullins to inform him that nothing was happening. So this is 2 years after the death, and he's just staking out Shapiro's home randomly in the summer, 2 years. I mean, wait, what? This doesn't make any sense. Just wait, the police are on their way over to Archeleta's, Shapiro says Mullins told him. Okay, so they called the police to search the house, I guess, and they wanted Shapiro to see what was going on. Okay. How do you know? Shapiro says he asked. Because we called the police and told them, so we know they'll be heading over there, Mullins replied, according to Shapiro. Shapiro kept at his post. Meanwhile, inside the house, Archuleta got a phone call from a Globe editor. According to the pilot, the Globe editor said that Archuleta's brother had told the Globe that John Ramsey had given Archuleta a box of evidence. Would he care to comment? The Globe editor inquired. Archuleta told the editor that he had been estranged from his brother for about 5 months. If you're taking information from my brother, that shows me how stupid you people are, he recalls having told the Globe editor. Soon after, Archuleta says an investigator contacted him to tell him that law enforcement officials were going to come out to his house that night to ask him about information that had just been called in from the Globe. The pilot says he had told the investigator that the police knew from extensive prior interviews that he had not been at the Ramseys' house the morning after the murder. Archuleta says he asked, "Why do you guys chase your tail around every time a Globe reporter calls?" The investigator told Archuleta that they had to follow up every lead, and if the tabloid press wrote that law enforcement had a tip that they didn't look into right away, the police department could get fried in the mainstream papers. Mark Backner, chief of the Boulder Police Department, declined to comment while the Ramsey investigation is still active. Sure enough, the police arrived at the pilot's house late in the night. Shapiro was there to capture the moment, and the Globe had its headline: World exclusive. Cops probe breakthrough charge in Little Beauty murder case. JONBENET. Dad caught hiding key evidence. Ramsey hid deathbed sheets, girl's nightie, and stuffed animals in box, then gave it to pilot, says source. The article included only one word of Archuleta's comments: inaccurate. From the beginning, the story was never based on legitimate sources, according to Shapiro. They initiated the whole thing, fed it to the police, got the police to react on it so they could write the story. So this is very, very interesting. So it still doesn't answer the question on why John Ramsey was calling Archuleta to set up some kind of a meeting in Atlanta that he had to go to. I mean, that part still doesn't make sense. Now, the charges that he gave him some kind of a box and all this stuff, if that was just John Archuleta, Michael Archuleta's estranged brother, making up stuff to get money, that's fine. But it still doesn't explain John Ramsey's sudden meeting and having to go to Atlanta, which of course the police did not let him do. Okay, now we're going to get into Mindshock coincidence territory. And let me set the stage here with this article from February 21st, 1997, Reports Sought in JONBENET's Sister's Death by Meg McSherry Breslin. So February 21st, 1997, Boulder, Colorado police investigating the death of 6-year-old beauty princess JONBENET Ramsey have asked for copies of autopsy and police reports on an apparently routine traffic accident in Downers Grove Township that led to Ramsey's half-sister's death. Ramsey's half-sister, Elizabeth Pash Ramsey, and her boyfriend, Matthew Darrington, died in the January 8th, 1992 accident on I-55 near County Line Road after Darrington's car crashed into a truck. Boulder police would not say why the accident reports were requested about a month ago. We're just following up any and all leads in the Ramsey investigation, said Leslie Ahome, a spokeswoman for Boulder Police. Ahome would not say whether investigators had been to Chicago or whether they planned to interview people there. Elizabeth Ramsey was the daughter of JONBENET's father, John Bennett, and his former wife, Lucinda Pash. Her death certificate said she died of multiple injuries resulting from a car accident. At the time of the accident, Elizabeth Ramsey was a 22-year-old flight attendant for Delta Airlines. Her home address was in Marietta, Georgia. According to a state police report, Elizabeth Ramsey was a passenger in the car, which went out of control on a rain-slicked I-55 at County Line Road and collided with a truck. A spokesman for the Cook County Medical Examiner's Office said the autopsy report was mailed or faxed to Boulder Police a month ago. Since 6-year-old JONBENET's body was discovered in the basement of her family's Boulder home on December 26th, authorities have released few details about the case. But on Thursday, Boulder prosecutors said John and Patricia Ramsey have not been eliminated as suspects. So this is February 21st, 97, and the article states that Cook County Medical's Office said the autopsy report was mailed or faxed to Boulder Police a month ago. So that would be January 21st-ish. So a month or so, within weeks, they wanted this report. What are they alleging here? And who was investigated when? So supposedly Mike Archuleta was investigated by Boulder Police January 7th, 1997. Now, so here's the mind shock. Who did John Ramsey meet when Elizabeth was killed January 8th, 1992? At Skybird Aviation. It was none other than Mike Archuleta. Another strange detail, and this was, again, this is just online musings. I don't know how much validity this has to it, but apparently Mike Archuleta had some kind of associate that lived next to the Ramseys, one street over. And apparently John Ramsey had no knowledge of this individual. So I can't find a source for this, for John Ramsey meeting Mike Archuleta at Skybird Aviation when Beth was killed. So this is on acandyrose.com. The reference here is just the standard books, Deaths of Innocent, Perfect Murder, Perfect Town. So it is most likely from one of these books. And it's quite interesting. Other information they have here. John Ramsey called Archuleta early December 26th, but the pilot was in transit. Co-pilot Richard Bailkovig took the call. When Archuleta called him back, hysterical Patsy answered the phone. Archuleta was to notify the commercial airline the Ramseys' children were arriving from Atlanta and leave word to call their father. So the original scheduled departure to Minneapolis was 7 a.m. At 1:30 p.m., John Ramsey calls Archuleta at home saying she's gone, they've killed her. Then instructions to ready a flight to Atlanta. Does that make any sense? And then, of course, there is supposedly John Ramsey's missing time. So what did he go to the airport for? To meet Mike Archuleta. So from Web Sleuths here, we have a post here referring to John's movements on Christmas. And this is why records were subpoenaed by the grand jury from the company that maintained John Ramsey's private plane at Jefferson County Airport, and they were delivered to the Justice Center by an employee of Stevens Aviation. This was Thursday, November 12th, 1998. So, from John Ramsey's Boulder Police Department interview, April 30th, 1997, who packed your bags to go out to Charlevoix? John Ramsey says, oh, well, Patsy packed, I think, the kids' bags and was just going to take a dock kit because I had another full set of clothes up there. Okay, so you guys don't have to take a lot of luggage or anything like that, huh? John says, we packed some presents that we were going to take up the day before. Where were those presents at? Well, I grabbed them Christmas morning, I think, or late Christmas morning, and I took them to the airport Christmas Day. So they were already out of the house. They were out of the house and in the airplane preloaded. Okay, what type of, you just carried a little small bath kit, shaving kit, I guess. How big of a suitcase does Patsy carry for the kids and herself? Oh, I don't remember. I remember there were some suitcases sitting out by the back stairs. Usually it's 3 of them bags. So here's a post. I've often wondered why John wanted to go to Michigan for such a brief time in the middle of winter. Patsy did not want to go. It seems like it would have to be more than his son getting a cheap flight to Minneapolis. Because they're that tight on money? I mean, I don't know. But until today, I'd never thought about what a palaver all of this was going to be. Thursday, fly from Colorado to Minneapolis, land briefly in Minneapolis, then continue to Charlevoix. Friday, relax or fly back to Colorado if John is right. Saturday, fly from Michigan to Colorado because that's what Patsy says they were going to do, and it just makes sense, I think. Sunday, fly from Colorado to Orlando, then take a bus to Cape Canaveral to be on the cruise ship that night, the 29th, Patsy's birthday. And I don't know if people have ever really looked at that schedule for it to make any kind of sense and really dissected it. Because John Ramsey says, well, the plan was to leave the morning of the 26th. I had an airplane at the time that was on charter through a charter company run by Mike Archuleta, who is also a friend, became a friend. Mike was going to fly us that morning, the 26th, from Jeffco to Minneapolis. We were going to get into Minneapolis before 11, and my older kids were going to arrive from Atlanta. From Atlanta to Minneapolis, we're going to pick them up and then go on to Charlevoix. And we did it that way because Charlevoix was a difficult place to get to with the airlines. And we were flying from Jeffco to Charlevoix. You almost fly over Minneapolis. So that would be really easy for us to stop in Minneapolis and pick them up. And they had really inexpensive tickets to get there on the airlines. So that was the plan. They were going to stay there for, I think it was till Friday. I forget what day the 26th was. It was Thursday. Inaudible. But we were going to stay for a couple days and come back to Boulder around Friday. Then I think the next morning on Saturday, we were going to leave for the Big Red boat trip with just JONBENET, Burke, and Patsy and me. So another response here. The purported flight the day after Christmas at 0700 hours doesn't pass the smell test. Neither does their whole itinerary times locations. John Ramsey called his pilot numerous times before 0700 that day. Why? So another postulation here. Both John Ramsey and Patsy Ramsey were willing to leave JONBENET behind, possibly including Burke, and flee interstate by plane so to avoid being arrested. Wow, is that this meeting that John Ramsey made up? And was he relying on Mike Archuleta as a friend to help get them out of there if they were to be implicated? That is curious. And even if innocent, if John Ramsey thought they would be viewed as guilty and arrested, is this what he would do? All right, let's look at further postulations here. Excellent point. The chances of the Ramseys having flying conditions at that time of year to ensure they would be able to stay on schedule to get them on their cruise would have been very iffy. Of course, they had the means to ditch the small plane in favor of a big commercial flight, which means they might have had a better chance in the event of bad weather. But I can attest to this also, having been to Charlevoix, that in the event of a winter storm, road travel in and out to a commercial airport might have been tricky too. Now, I wonder if the reason the Ramsey big kids were to take a commercial flight was because John Ramsey never really planned the private plane for anything other than his own escape. If Patsy Ramsey would not have called 911 and instead took the Ramsey note as it read, could John Ramsey have convinced her to take Burke and have Archuleta fly them to meet his other kids in Minneapolis, where they would instead be flown to Atlanta, into the company of family, and not to Charlevoix at all? Maybe because the delivery will be exhausting of the ransom money, John Ramsey could have easily convinced Patsy Ramsey he had to use his plane for the delivery of the ransom, so she would agree to the corporate jet flight. It never made sense to me that John Ramsey was at the airport on Christmas Day for hours, readying his plane, and Patsy was using plastic bags for clothing for the kids so they wouldn't go overweight, stuffing his other kids with their bags into John's plane, then having Archuleta pilot them. A pilot usually readies his own plane. Yes, John Ramsey had a vision problem, but it never stopped him from piloting his own plane on many other occasions. But if John Ramsey all the while actually planned to have Archuleta get Patsy, Ramsey, and Burke out of his way, it stands to reason he would have spent those hours readying his own plane for himself to use to deliver the ransom. And if anyone in the hangar saw him leaving alone later on, how convenient to simply say he had a business delay and was going on now to join the rest of his family, especially if he was carrying a blue Samsonite suitcase with him. And these are some very astute observations, because we don't know what the real plan was. Again, regardless of who's innocent, who's guilty, what's going on, is it a staged kidnapping, who's responsible, regardless of any of that, if there is a plan being hatched, the timeline with the flights surely doesn't add up. This is really bizarre, and it's really interesting. So another poster here states, I have no problem believing that John Ramsey could have pre-planned JonBenet's murder, thinking that her molestation would soon be discovered and either place him or John Andrew Ramsey in a devastating position. After reading The Other Side of Suffering, it became very clear to me that John Ramsey suffered a grave emotional disturbance after Elizabeth was killed, and still being on medication related to that trauma when JonBenet was killed, may have easily slipped into a multi-delusional existence, allowing him to think that JonBenet could only become better off once she was with Beth, his words. And the molestation could be covered up once and for all, and saving him and or John Andrew Ramsey from scrutiny. Okay. So, and then of course, The Other Side of Suffering is a 2012 book by JONBENET Ramsey. Did we ever talk about his middle name? It's John Bennett. And that's where JonBenet came from. Is that vain? I don't know. And another post here. It's quite interesting that after Fleet White had dropped off Burke Ramsey at his place, he placed a call 8 a.m. to Pam Archuleta, the pilot's wife, and questioned her about her husband and the flight. Fleet White was playing detective early, and for good reason. Another response here. Nice point. Looks like Fleet White knew from not seeing JonBenet on his first visit, yet she appears magically for John Ramsey on his second visit, that John Ramsey was implicated. Fleet White has to be thinking, has it all been planned and staged in advance? Was I set up? And that's a good point, because the Fleet White, I mean, what he was thinking throughout this whole time and after the fact, and what his real thoughts are, I mean, that would be very interesting to know. So these are all quite mysterious. Going back to the timeline I was going over, this is from darkmatter69.blogspot.com from May 2019. What you might not know about JonBenet's murder might shock you, or mind shock you. So again, going back to Kim Archuleta, Kim was told not to talk about this with anyone until they went to court. Kim was never asked by the grand jury or anyone for that matter to give a statement or opinion. I believe she did, though. The 911 call has been examined by many people and organizations, all with differing opinions, even though the FBI and the Secret Service did an analysis coming to the conclusion that no further conversation is audible. It is a highly debated subject. Some audio engineers and investigators think that this is what is at the end of the call. John says, "We are not speaking to you." Patsy says, "What did you do? Help me, Jesus." Burke asks, "What did you find?" And that does indeed seem to be what is audible. So was that really what was at the end of the 911 call? Did the Ramseys lie and Burke was really awake? Was he really asleep and there was someone else in the house? Why didn't Patsy ever mention JonBenet's name during the call? 5:59 a.m., Officer French arrives on the scene. When Patsy greeted the officer, she was wearing the same clothes that she had worn the night before. 6 to 8 a.m., 4 more officers arrived. Policemen Veitch, Weiss, and Barklow, and their supervisor Reichenbach. JonBenet's parents have friends come to help search the home, including the aforementioned Whites, the Fernies, and Reverend Hoverstock. Victim advocates and crime scene investigators are also present in the house. A cursory search of the house is conducted but did not find any forced entry. Officer French went to the basement and came to a wooden door that was secured by a wooden latch. He paused for a moment in front of the door, then walked away without opening it. Now that is a thorough search. According to statements that Patsy gave to authorities that day, she realized that JonBenet was missing after she found a 2.5-page note on the kitchen staircase. The note demanded $118,000 for a safe return. No fingerprints were found on the note. I believe that's inaccurate. I think Patsy's were found on the note. John Ramsey's were not. The note and a practice draft were written with a pen and paper from the Ramseys' home belonging to Patsy. The pen that was used to write the ransom note was neatly put back in its place by the phone. Supposedly, the ransom note's time element indicates that it was composed around midnight. Take the line, "I advise you to be rested." From the ransom note, according to experts, a kidnapper would not normally give such advice to his victims. Why would the kidnappers tell the victims to get rest when they were already supposedly sleeping? And why would the kidnappers care? The note never referred to JonBenet by name. Was it too emotionally difficult for the authors of the note to write JonBenet's name? Investigators surmised that it would have taken 21 minutes just to write the note, plus to compose and to write the draft version. The amount of money asked for in the ransom note was kind of small when you consider that John was a CEO for a billion-dollar company. The amount of money asked for was the same as the previous bonus that John received from work. And again, if you are Patsy or John commissioning Patsy to write this note, would you give that away? Unless you're, of course, trying to frame somebody that John is working with? I mean, it's weird. It doesn't really make a lot of sense in either direction. So this blog states, detectives believe that the note was written by a woman and dictated by someone else. It couldn't be proven that Patsy did or did not write the note. And again, does this factor in someone trying to frame Patsy and writing the note in her handwriting? Linda Arndt arrives 8 a.m. with the goal of awaiting the kidnapper's instructions, but there was never any attempt to claim the money. 10:30 a.m., Arndt calls for backup at least twice while left in the house alone. With Ramsey family and friends, 7 in total, she is told that all officers are in Boulder Police Department meeting and they received her message. No one was sent because they were short-staffed. Does that make sense? There's a kidnapped 6-year-old and they're short-staffed even though there were officers there previously? I mean, does this make any kind of sense on any level from any direction? It's just really bizarre. John goes missing for at least an hour. Some say he left the house to supposedly pick up the mail. Later, it is determined that that could not be true, given that the family's mail was delivered through a slot in the front door. Whatever happened, he allegedly was unaccounted for 90 minutes. Some people believe he went to meet Mike Archuleta. Mid-morning, sometime before 1 p.m., Fleet White allegedly was in the windowless wine cellar looking around. He told police he never turned on the light and he never saw anything. 1 p.m., Arndt asked John and his family friend Fleet White to search the house top to bottom to see if anything seemed amiss. And is that a proper procedure? I don't know. It seems like you should not allow family members, potential suspects, to do this. It's just really bizarre. John and White started the search in the basement. John opened the latch door, the one that investigators failed to open earlier, and found JONBENET's body. Her mouth was covered with duct tape, a nylon cord was found around her wrists and neck, and her torso was covered by a white blanket. John immediately picked up JONBENET's body and ripped the duct tape off her mouth. He then carried her up the stairs to the living room. He set her on the living room floor next to the Christmas tree. Some accounts say that John places another blanket on JONBENET before he carried her up the stairs, and some say after. Either way, the evidence on the body was now contaminated. The sticky side of the duct tape had a perfect imprint of JONBENET's lips, but no indication of a protruding tongue or any effort to dislodge the tape. This suggests that the tape was used as a prop in staging a scene, like it was placed after death. The cord was tied far too loosely to restrain a living or conscious child. The route to the wine cellar would be very difficult to navigate by a stranger, especially at night, carrying a child. The staircase light switch was not in an expected location on the wall, but behind someone entering the stairs, so they probably would have done all this in the dark. 1:30 p.m., Boulder policemen Ron Walker and Larry Mason arrive and search the basement and wine cellar for further clues. They also finally secure the home, preventing any further arrivals. 1:40 p.m., John Ramsey calls his pilot and is allegedly heard asking him to prepare the plane to Atlanta. Law enforcement instructs the family not to leave town. 1:45 p.m., heeding the officer's warning, the Ramseys leave their house with plans to stay the night at the Fernie's home. 2:30 p.m., John and Patsy participated in a preliminary interview for more than 2 hours. And Burke was also interviewed within the first couple of weeks. Now, this blog also mentions something. Let's look at Glen Meyer again here. His son was murdered in Boston. And I don't know if I'm turning into Maxwell, but I don't remember going over that in the previous episode. Perhaps I did. He lived in Barnhill's basement at the time of JONBENET's murder. When interviewed by detectives, Meyer said that he had been at home on Christmas night, and he had watched television in the den with the Barnhills until 9 p.m. He then went downstairs to his basement room and spent the rest of the evening nursing a stomach flu. Meyer was also at the Ramseys' Christmas party, but he said he hadn't been introduced to Patsy or JONBENET. He took a polygraph test. Most of the questions were about the Ramseys, and the examiner told him he had answered the questions truthfully. And then, of course, we went over his ex-wife, Charlotte, who came forward claiming that Glen killed JONBENET. She said he was obsessed with JONBENET. She claims, when I asked him if he murdered her, he would just smile at me. He wouldn't deny it. At the time of the murder, he was secretly living in the basement of a home across the street from the Ramsey home. Later, he built a shrine to her using pictures and newspaper clippings. Supposedly, his handwriting matched the ransom note found in the Ramsey home. Cops considered him a suspect. John said that Meyer turned up in his house uninvited when the family hosted a party December 23, 1996. A new witness made a deathbed confession. She said she saw Meyer on the Ramsey property the night of JONBENET's murder. Meyer battled mental illness. Meyer was arrested in 1991, assault in a domestic violence case, and was ordered to attend anger counseling courses. In August 95, he was sued for owing more than $24,000. He was violent with my little girl. She was in 4th grade, and he gave her a horrible spanking. I told him to stop, but he wouldn't. A lot of times he was cruel to my kids. They were afraid of him. I was scared of him, Charlotte recalled. Somehow, he ends up living in the basement of JONBENET's elderly babysitters, Joe and Betty Barnhill. Investigators want to exhume Meyer's body to see if they can solve this cold case once and for all. So again, this is from the Dark Matter 69blogspot.com. There's a whole lot of information here of varying accuracy. So take from that what you will, but it seems like, again, anywhere you look in this case, there's problems, there's anomalies, there's coincidences that don't make sense, and there's just so many unanswered questions, and we'll, of course, continue to explore these questions in further episodes. Believe it or not, there's plenty more still to go over, including suspects that have not been previously named and theories that have not been previously explored. As always, if you enjoy the podcast, you find it informative, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Help support the channel, help us get more mind-shocking content out there, and find justice in some of these unsolved cases, or cases where the perpetrators have not been definitively brought to justice. Like and share this podcast on social media, of which you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Patreon. Patrons do get a priority for case topic logical analysis. Requests, co-podcaster requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Just check the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that bell for notifications. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.